The sound of the church organ echoed through the stone halls of St. Augustine as I stepped out into the quiet side corridor just minutes before my daughter's wedding was set to begin. My name is Marlene Carter, and for 56 years I've believed that honesty and hard work could protect everything I loved. But that belief shattered the moment I stopped outside the groom's dressing room and heard my soon-to-be son-in-law laughing with his friends. I swear Tyler's voice carried through the cracked door, smug and cruel. The thought of sleeping with that chubby girl makes me sick, but hey, her mom owns half the town. I'll put up with it for the orchard. Their laughter rolled out like thunder. I froze, clutching the small gold locket Grace gave me when she was 6. My throat tightened. My daughter was marrying a man who saw her as nothing but a paycheck, and in that instant, I knew this wedding would not end as he planned. Grace Carter had always been my reason for everything. When her father passed away 15 years ago, I poured every ounce of my strength into raising her and keeping our family's orchard, Willow Creek, alive. That land wasn't just property. It was generations of sweat, prayers, and faith. Every mango tree, every worker who greeted me at sunrise carried a piece of our story. In Cedar Ridge, people knew us by name. They bought our fruit, came to our harvest festivals, and said I'd done right by my late husband. Grace grew up running barefoot between the rows of trees, her laughter blending with the summer wind. She was shy, gentle, always believing the best in people, a heart too pure for the kind of deceit I had just overheard. And now, as I stood in that hallway, those same walls that once echoed with love felt like they were closing in. My daughter's happiness and our legacy were both hanging by a thread. I should have walked away. I should have turned and pretended I hadn't heard a thing. But something deep inside me, maybe the same instinct that once woke me when Grace cried as a baby, kept me frozen there, listening. Through the narrow gap in the door, Tyler's voice was unmistakable. "If it weren't for the orchard, do you think I'd even look at her?" he said, his tone dripping with mockery. One of his groomsmen snorted. "At least you're securing the mother-in-law's fortune. That place could be worth millions." They all laughed, the kind of cruel, careless laughter that stings the air. I could picture their polished shoes, their tuxedos, their champagne glasses clinking as they made a joke of my daughter's life. Grace, my sweet, trusting girl, was sitting in the bridal suite just down the hall, smiling at the mirror, thinking she'd found love. And here he was, her future husband, spitting venom behind her back. My knees weakened, and I pressed my palm against the cold wall for balance. The organ music swelled again, muffling the sound of their laughter. I clutched the locket so tightly it left a mark on my skin. The truth was a blade, and I had no idea how deep it was about to cut. As I stepped back from that door, the weight of what I'd heard settled on me like a stone. My first instinct was to burst into the room and expose him for the fraud he was, to tear the mask right off his smug face. But then I pictured Grace, radiant and trembling in her wedding dress, waiting for her cue to walk down the aisle. She loved him. She believed every word he'd ever whispered. If I ruined it now, in front of everyone, she would think I was acting out of jealousy or control. And once a mother loses her daughter's trust, no truth can reach her heart. I took a deep breath, the kind that burns on the way out, and told myself I had to stay calm for her sake. There would be a moment, I decided, a private moment before she said I do. That's when I would tell her everything, no matter how much it broke her heart. When I entered the bridal suite, the sight nearly broke me. Grace sat before the mirror in her white gown, the morning light turning her veil into a halo. Her eyes sparkled, unaware of the storm waiting outside that door. Zoe, her best friend since high school, was fixing the lace along her shoulders and humming softly. I waited until the makeup artist left, then quietly closed the door. "Sweetheart," I began, my voice trembling, "I need to talk to you alone." Grace turned, smiling. "What's wrong, Mom? You look pale." "I just heard something about Tyler." Her expression faltered, confusion replacing joy. I forced myself to speak. "He called you names, Grace, cruel names. He said he's only marrying you for Willow Creek, for our money." Grace's eyes widened, her lips trembling. Before she could respond, Zoe stepped between us. "Mrs. Carter," she said sharply, "this is her wedding day. Don't ruin it with some misunderstanding. Tyler adores Grace." But I saw something in Zoe's eyes, something cold, something that didn't fit her kind tone. Grace looked from her to me, tears welling. "Mom, please, not today." And just like that, the truth I carried fell on deaf ears. The bells began to ring, solemn and steady, echoing through the old church walls. I stood there, numb, as the bridesmaids rushed in, adjusting veils and flowers, filling the room with laughter that sounded painfully out of place. Grace wiped her eyes, forcing a smile. "Let's just get through this, Mom," she whispered, and before I could say another word, she was gone, carried by tradition and hope. From my seat in the front row, everything blurred: the organ, the vows, the guests leaning in with admiration. My daughter's smile looked perfect, but I knew it was built on lies. Tyler stood tall beside her, his hand steady, his grin charming. No one could see the monster beneath the polished surface. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," I felt my stomach twist. Everyone clapped, but I couldn't move. I had just witnessed a beautiful tragedy begin. The reception glowed under strings of golden lights, laughter floating through the evening air. Guests toasted, danced, and called it the happiest day of Grace's life. I stood near the back, a glass of untouched champagne in my hand, watching Tyler glide from table to table, charming everyone with practiced ease. No one saw what I had seen, no one heard what I had heard. A week later, whispers began to spread through Cedar Ridge. Marlene Carter tried to ruin her daughter's wedding. They said I couldn't let go. At the market, women I'd known for years turned their backs as I passed. It was as if I'd become the villain in my own story. I wanted to shout the truth, but I stayed silent. Let them think what they wanted. I knew patience would be my weapon. The truth, I promised myself, would surface soon enough. A few days later, I drove to Grace's new home, a neat little house on the edge of town. I told myself it was just to check in, to see how she was settling in, but my heart knew better. Something inside me was restless, uneasy. When she opened the door, her smile was polite but distant. "Mom, I wish you'd called first," she said softly. Behind her, I could see Tyler sitting at a desk covered with documents, neat stacks of paper, folders, pens lined up perfectly. "What's all this?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "Oh, just business stuff," Tyler said, flashing that same easy smile. "Grace is helping me sign a few things for the company. Routine paperwork." But as I stepped closer, my eyes caught the bold words printed across one page: power of attorney, collateral agreement, pledge of assets, and beneath it, the name Willow Creek Orchard appeared again and again. Grace didn't seem to notice. She signed quickly, trusting, her pen gliding across the pages. A chill ran through me, slow and cold. He wasn't just using her heart anymore. He was after our land, our legacy. And I realized right then that silence could destroy everything my family had built. When Grace excused herself to the bathroom, I felt my pulse quicken. Tyler's phone rang and he stepped out onto the porch to take the call. For the first time, the room was empty. My hands trembled, but my mind was clear. I crossed to the desk, lifted the top page, and began snapping photos with my phone. Each click of the camera sounded like thunder in the silence. Words like mortgage, transfer of title, and loan guarantee burned into my eyes. If Grace signed these, Tyler would own everything, every acre of our orchard, every drop of sweat my family had poured into that land. The water running in the bathroom reminded me I only had seconds. I placed the pages back exactly as they were and sat down pretending to scroll through my phone just as Grace returned. "Mom, are you okay?" I smiled weakly. "Just thinking, honey," and I was thinking of how to fight back. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those papers, the words, the signatures, the trap. At dawn, I drove straight to Henry Lawson's office, the man who had handled my family's legal affairs for decades. His small office above the hardware store smelled of paper and old coffee, but to me, it always felt like safety. Henry listened quietly as I showed him the photos. His expression darkened with each image. When he finished, he removed his glasses and sighed. "Marlene," he said, "if Grace signs even one of these, Tyler will have full authority over Willow Creek. He can mortgage, sell, or use your property to secure loans in his name." The words hit like a blow. "So he's stealing everything right under her nose?" Henry nodded. "And he's counting on your silence." He leaned forward, voice low and steady. "Don't confront him yet. We need proof more than photos. Keep calm, stay close to Grace, and watch. We'll catch him in his own web." For the first time since the wedding, I had hope and a plan. The next morning, Henry called to say he had arranged a meeting for me with someone who could help, a private detective named Nate Delgado. When Nate arrived at the small diner off Highway 17, he looked nothing like the detectives from television. Mid-40s, quiet eyes, and a calm way of speaking that made you trust him instantly. I told him everything: the overheard conversation, the fake contracts, the lies. He listened, taking notes with neat, deliberate strokes. When I finished, he closed his notebook. "I'll find out what he's really up to," he said simply. "Give me a week." 3 days later, Nate called. "You'd better sit down," he warned. He had photos Tyler in Chicago walking hand in hand with a woman named Sabrina Cole, a banker. There were dinner receipts, hotel records, and an apartment lease signed under his company's name. And worst of all, Nate had captured an audio recording, Tyler bragging to Sabrina about how easy it was to manipulate Grace. "That orchard will be mine soon. The old lady's too proud to see it coming." The room fell silent. The only sound was the soft gasp that escaped Grace's lips as tears welled in her eyes. When Mason took the stand, his testimony cut deeper than any lawyer's argument. He told the court how Tyler had stolen from his own blood, how their father's heart had failed under the shame. Tyler's calm facade cracked. "He's lying," he shouted, rising to his feet. But the judge's gavel struck hard. Henry ended with quiet resolve. "Your Honor, this isn't just fraud. It's betrayal of family, of trust, of decency." The judge nodded gravely, and as Tyler sat back down, his confidence drained. I finally saw the face of a man cornered by his own lies. When Henry finished, the judge turned to Grace. "Mrs. Brooks," he said gently, "do you wish to say anything before I deliver my ruling?" Grace stood slowly. Her hands shook as she pressed them to the edge of the wooden bench for balance. For a moment, she looked so small, so fragile, the same little girl who once hid behind my legs during thunderstorms. But then she lifted her chin, and her voice, though trembling, carried through the courtroom. "I was blind," she said softly. "I believed every word he told me. I thought love meant trust, no matter what. But love built on lies isn't love at all. I was deceived, Your Honor, and today I want my freedom back." The room was silent. Even Tyler froze. Grace turned to me, her eyes glistening with tears. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't believe you." I stood and reached for her hand, my own shaking. "You believed in him once, sweetheart. Now believe in yourself." And for the first time in months, I saw my daughter stand tall, free and unafraid. The verdict came quickly. Tyler Brooks was found guilty of organized fraud and sentenced to 7 years in state prison. His partner, Sabrina Cole, faced charges of complicity and was banned from working in finance. When the officers placed cuffs on Tyler's wrists, he tried to meet Grace's eyes, but she wouldn't look at him. That single act of silence was louder than any revenge could ever be. Outside the courthouse, sunlight spilled across the steps. Grace stood beside me, pale but calm, her hand clutching mine. "It's over," she whispered. I nodded, though I knew healing would take time. Weeks later, she came home to Willow Creek. The first morning, I found her in the orchard just after dawn, barefoot on the damp grass, breathing in the scent of mango blossoms. "It smells like home," she said, smiling faintly. She spent the following days learning every corner of the business, checking invoices, meeting workers, taking notes with quiet determination. I watched her from the porch, proud beyond words. The girl who once doubted her worth now walked the fields with confidence, and though the land was the same, everything felt new again, alive, honest and ours. As the seasons turned, I watched Grace transform. She no longer avoided mirrors or hid behind excuses. One morning, over breakfast, she told me she had joined a fitness program. Not because I want to fit anyone's idea of beauty, she said with a smile, but because I finally want to take care of myself. Every sunrise, she jogged along the orchard trails, her hair pulled back, her breath steady. The workers began calling her Miss Grace, just as they once called me Miss Marlene. Watching her grow stronger each day felt like witnessing the orchard bloom again after a harsh winter. We often talked about what happened, not with bitterness, but with understanding. Grace said something I'll never forget. Pain teaches us what love never should. From that moment, I promised myself to share our story, not as a warning, but as a reminder of the red flags people overlook when they mistake control for care and silence for peace. Love should never cost you your voice, your dreams, or your dignity. And when you finally choose yourself, the whole world starts to feel lighter. One golden evening, Grace and I stood on the porch overlooking Willow Creek. The mango trees swayed gently, their leaves whispering in the warm breeze. For the first time in years, I felt peace, not the kind that comes from silence, but the kind that grows from truth. Grace slipped her arm through mine. "We did it, Mom," she said softly. I smiled. "No, sweetheart, you did it. You found your strength. The sweetest revenge wasn't seeing Tyler fall. It was seeing my daughter rise." If our story touched you, tell me where you're watching from. Share it with someone who needs courage today. And remember, truth always finds its way home.